The Australian Financial Review.
Hello, I'm James Thompson, Senior Chanticleer columnist at the AFR. Welcome to our weekly news breakdown of all things business, finance and markets. With me today, as always, is my Chanticleer colleague. He analyses markets with Elon Musk-like efficiency. It's Anthony McDonald. How are you, Anthony?
Very well, thank you, James. I'm glad I don't have the Razor Gang on the tail, though.
Absolutely. Well, this week we take you live onto the floor of Australia's biggest shindig for stock pickers. We ask whether the superannuation sector has a systemic problem, and we look at whether Elon Musk can really make productivity great again.
But first, James, you're coming to us live from Adelaide, where the annual Sohn Hearts and Minds Conference is being held for the first time this year. Tell us a little bit about the concept of this conference and what's your role been?
Well, my role is to report on it, but it's a conference that involves, basically it's set up for a bunch of stock pickers to come and give their best idea for the year ahead. So a stock that they really love can be from anywhere in the world. We've got stock pickers from all parts of the world, including Australia, and they hope that this stock is going to take off for the next 12 months. It's a bit of a sort of, competition, a gladiatorial competition between stock pickers, but it does have a good cause. All the money raised goes towards medical research. Over the 9 years this conference has been going, they've raised over $70 million, which is really good. And there's some big name backers. Barrenjoey, Executive Chairman Matthew Grounds and Guy Fowler, along with veteran director and investor Gary Weiss, are sort of the main men. Billionaire Solomon Lew is a big supporter. He's here. Former RBA Governor Philip Lowe is here, Anthony.
Really?
Yeah, he's helping keep inflation low around the place. And I've just come off stage from doing an interview with Howard Marks, which was great fun. It was a really interesting interview, as always.
Howard Marks, you two are good mates. I remember.
We're mates, yes.
What did he have to say about the state of the world, James? I remember he had a great joke that the big worry about the US election was that one of the candidates would win. So how's he feeling now?
Well, I think he's feeling okay-ish would be my description.
Yeah.
He had some great gags about Donald Trump's cabinet choices, which he described as a little unusual, I think, in one of the understatements of the year.
Polite.
And he had another great line that he said, "I don't know a lot about geopolitics, which makes me ideal to be in Trump's cabinet," which I thought was a good dig. Look, I think he's, like everybody, he just doesn't know which way this is going to go. Is Trump going to be pro-growth, pro-business? That sounds good. Or is he going to be tariffs, trade war? That sounds bad. I thought the best line he had, though, Anthony, was about China. And everyone's worried about a trade war between China and the US. And he sort of had this point that China wants to grow its economy at 5%. It can't grow its economy at 5% from just domestic demand or selling to Russia and North Korea and Iran. So it needs to stay friendly with the world. There's a sort of economic imperative for it to play by the rules, or at least find some way to play by the rules. So I thought that was bit more hopeful. When you think of it like that, incentives are always important, and China's got a big incentive to sort of play nice, is Howard Marks' view.
Yeah, good to hear. Now, James, I've noticed a couple of funny movements on the ASX this morning. There must be some stock tips flying around. What have you heard?
Oh my gosh. Well, you know what I've heard, Anthony?
Yeah.
I've heard some absolute bargain shopping here. Two stock picks this morning have knocked me off my feet.
Yeah. Corporate
Travel Management, which is it jumped over 3%, I believe, on the ASX after it was picked by IFM investors Ricky Bannon. Now, she sort of said this is a long-term play. The market hates this stock, but there's opportunity for it to grow its earnings at 15% compound annual growth over the next few years. International travel's coming back, corporate travel's coming back, ticket prices are going to come down. Stick with Corporate Travel Management, but this is deeply unloved stock at the moment, right?
Yeah, it is. But 16 times PE, right? So it's not that expensive for 15% a year-on-year growth. And they're the consensus numbers. Like, go Ricky.
Sounds like might be moving into the McDonald Chook Super Fund here. And then the other one, Anthony, this is going to get you. Chris Cordis from Elliston. He comes out in a room full of fund managers and picks the most beaten up fund manager on the ASX, Perpetual.
Ooh.
Now, you've studied this company. Talk about unloved.
Yeah.
Perpetual is deeply unloved, isn't it?
Deeply unloved, and deeply unloved by people like Chris Cordes normally.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, he thinks it's the cheapest fund manager in the world, or the cheapest asset manager in the world. So, yeah, it's a bit of a basket case, but it's a cheap basket case.
Okay.
And so there were some other interesting tips. An accounting software firm in the US called Blackline, a Chinese music business called that's attached to Tencent, their music arm. So all sorts of weird and wonderful things. I think the thing that I would say about this is that it's interesting to see how fund managers, a bit like journalists, they're good at going out and finding that weird little story, that weird little bit of data that helps support their stock pick. So, yeah, it's been a great morning, and more to come on as the afternoon wears on.
Oh, it should be fun, James.
Well, Anthony, let's move to our first topic. And just when you thought the world of Donald Trump couldn't get any weirder, Elon Musk was this week appointed as the head of a new government department that will be created when Donald Trump takes office, called the Department of Government Efficiency. Now, this body, which is going to run till July 4, 2026, yes, that's the 250th anniversary of the establishment of the Declaration of Independence, it appears to be set to get a huge free hand to strip cost and waste and bureaucracy out of the US government. Anthony, I reckon this could have some seriously big ramifications, and it could be the best idea ever, or it could be an absolute disaster, but surely Musk has the ability to change America. Now, what did you make of this big idea? And can you please tell me, is it a bit inefficient that Musk will actually share this job with another tech entrepreneur, Vivek Ramaswamy?
Yeah, the irony, James. I mean, I'm not sure I'd want a job share with Elon, James. I mean, who do you think would get stuck with all the annoying bits of work if you were sharing with him? But I mean, the idea itself isn't new. I mean, we see these sort of kitchen cabinets, these lay people that advise presidents or prime ministers all the time. You know, every leader has his or her collection of confidants. It's just usually the leader, you know, deals with them behind closed doors. We don't get their names at press conferences. They don't get shout outs. They don't get these formal sort of positions. And they're not normally, you know, rich, crazy celebrity types like Elon Musk. So I remember about a decade ago, James, when Tony Abbott came into power in Australia here, he had Maurice Newman, who was like the former Deutsche Bank executive in Australia. And one of those sort of like bit of a chairman of everything types. I think he was chairman of the ABC, ASX, all sorts of stuff. Yep. He got appointed. Tony Abbott like brought him in straight away, set up this thing called the Business Advisory Council, and all of a sudden was taking advice from him and pulled in a bunch of other big name directors, your Catherine Livingstons, Jack Nasser, Michael Chaney, you know, all the Australian business celebrities. And no one was really sure what the Business Advisory Council did exactly. But it was all that, you know, efficiency sort of stuff. So I don't know, James, it's also quite ironic, isn't it, that they're setting up a whole new department to do this. Like, couldn't they just do it out of Treasury or like a little bit of the White House? But I guess it's something we see conservative leaders do, isn't it? It's very easy and popular. And I mean, I'd argue valid to a point to come in and say, look, government's bloated, government spending's too much, public service is lazy. We need it to get lean and mean. I mean, it's just about the one thing, you know, that Donald Trump has sort of come out with that might be able to save the government money, right? Other than just cutting taxes and doing all this populist stuff. So I don't know. Elon's what makes it interesting though, isn't it, James? Like, it's just another wild card.
Yeah, no, totally.
How do you think Musk will approach this? Can we take any clues from what he's done at Tesla?
Yeah, I think so. There's a big biography by Walter Isaacson of Elon Musk last year, and it actually went into a lot of this. It's been referenced a lot this week about how Musk has cut bureaucracy at Tesla. And, you know, there's sort of 5 steps, you know, challenging what we actually need, realigning processes, delete everything that's unnecessary, speed up the timelines, and then automate. Now, I'm not sure you can automate the US government, but I guess that idea of challenging what we actually need, trying to speed things up, and then deleting what's unnecessary, those are going to be the core things. Now, it sounds okay if you're making cars, but there's always that risk that you delete something that seems minor in the US government and it's actually really important. I don't know if you've read that book, that book by Michael Lewis about the first Trump presidency, The Fifth Risk. There's great stuff in there about how, the Trump administration the first time round didn't really think there was much of a need for this little minor regulator that oversaw nuclear waste. But then you think about it and you go, well, that's actually pretty important. We probably don't want to get nuclear waste wrong. So is there a danger that Musk comes in and goes, chop, 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 chop? And, 5 things that we don't need are gone. That's great. But that one thing that he does chop turns out to be really important. So that's the danger here. But I guess I'm with you, Anthony. I don't mind the sort of out-of-the-box thinking and fresh ideas and bringing in an outsider to have a crack at it. It does really contrast, Anthony, with what we're doing in Australia. I mean, ironically, as Musk was being appointed, Treasurer Jim Chalmers was giving a speech about productivity and what can be done to bolster it. You know what his big idea was, Anthony?
What?
We're going to launch 5 new inquiries about productivity by the Productivity Commission to figure out what's wrong with productivity. I mean, it's a pretty big difference, isn't it? Superman Musk versus 5 more inquiries.
It is. Big difference. Yeah, his speech on Wednesday, the productivity, and I think we've spoken about this before, James. Like it's that productivity is a bit of a dirty word in Australia. Like in workplaces, the boss says productivity and workers go, hang on, you want me to do more for less? You want me to help you make more money? That sort of attitude's ingrained in the psyche here. When actually it's about doing more, getting for more economic growth, getting more bang for your buck, essentially bang for your investment. And I mean, to Chalmers' point, it's also about fighting inflation. More productivity should mean lower cost per unit for whether you're manufacturing widgets or you're an accountant doing cash reconciliations, a lawyer doing legal work, whatever. It should hopefully mean that cost savings are passed on to customers, and that stops prices going up as much. That's a good thing. It's a key ingredient in this whole cost of living problem. But I mean, Chalmers' solutions, some of them are a little bit dinky. Directionally, they're right, but they're a bit dinky, like his 500 nuisance tariffs that he talked us through earlier this year, James. Like, yeah, sure, get rid of them, but they weren't sort of like big company-changing things. I mean, the other stuff was skills investment, expanding the NBN into regional areas to harness digital and data. Some of the investment stuff they've got, the capacity investment scheme, Future Made in Australia, and then fifth of all, reforming the NDIS. But to your point, it's pretty much the opposite of what it sounds like Elon's been brought in to do over there in the US. Just on Elon, James, like there's one thing we know about him, right? He's a turn up to the office guy, right? Which office is he turning up to? Is he going to be turning up to this new department, or is he turning up to Tesla, or is he turning up to SpaceX, or what? How does he do it? He needs an avatar or 2 or 3.
Holograms. Yeah. All right. Let's give the rating though. Is Musk going to be a disaster or a savior?
Toss a coin. But I mean, it's hard not to be cynical about this one. He and Trump, I mean, they're both crash or crash through types. Pretty alpha, both used to being the boss. How long does the bromance last, James? We know
that's a great question.
We know Elon goes through partners pretty quickly. I mean, Elon, you look at his skills, he's an entrepreneur, visionary, builds things from the ground up, takes risks without blowing up, he's forceful. None of that sounds like the public service to me, James. I mean, the US system, it's all built on checks and balances, and it really doesn't sound like Elon. And, everyone walks around, they love dreaming up big policy, particularly like this, the start of a 4-year term. They want the Prime Minister or the President to do this or that. But the big part of the job is actually implementing the policy, right, and doing it. And that doesn't sound like Elon to me. But what do you think? Do you think he'll go all right?
Oh, no, I don't know. It's so many things about the Trump presidency are a flip of the coin, Getting back to that idea that Howard Marks was talking about. Is pro-growth going to be good, or are we going to just have inflation, which is the thing that has decided this election? Like, I've got no idea. I'm with you though. I think watch the personal relationship here.
Yeah.
Trump has a habit of falling out with almost everyone he works with, and then sometimes falling back in love with them. I mean, we had a great Australian example. I mean, Trump called Anthony Pratt a red-headed weirdo on Twitter a couple of years ago, and now he's back in the gang. So I don't know. Let's see how the personal relationship works. But I don't mind the idea of fresh thinking on bureaucracy. I mean, we hear this from CEOs all the time, Anthony. Planning, approvals. It's sand in the gears of the economy. So anything that can be done to improve that, if there's some good guardrails and accountability around it, I say why not have a crack? But it's the lack of guardrails and accountability, I think we can't see any of that at the moment. Trump seems to have given these guys a huge free hand. That's what worries me.
Yeah, he's really building a bit of a team of outsiders, isn't he? Like it's not just Elon and Vivek. The other one this week was Pete Hegseth, the new Secretary of Defense, the top military official in the White House. They picked him off Fox News. He's a former soldier, infantry captain. He served in Afghanistan and Iraq, but he's got no senior military experience or national security experience. And then he's the top guy in the White House on defense. Like it's just amazing.
Do you think either of the major parties are listening to this podcast, sizing you up for a role in their new administration next year?
I don't think they're looking at me. But just say that they are listening, James, and obviously they're listening to what Trump's doing over in the US.
Totally.
If it got to the election next year, one of the parties wins, and they decide that they want to sharpen up the Australian public service, who do you think out there could be their Elon Musk to come in and do it for them?
Wow. Do we have an Elon Musk here? I think we've got to say Elon Musk they broke the mold after they made him. But here's a couple of ideas for you. I reckon one of the efficiency master at the big end of town, it's Mike Henry from BHP. Now, Mike Henry would want absolutely nothing to do with an Elon Musk type role. Let me get that out there. But he has done a great job of just driving improved efficiency and productivity, fighting bureaucracy within a big company like BHP. So I reckon he has, they talk about him having a laser-like focus. I reckon a big challenge like that, he'd be ideal. And my other suggestion is the man that sort of basically runs Sydney, Peter V'landys.
Wow.
He runs Racing New South Wales and he runs the NRL. Now, I got to say, I'm not always a fan, but man, he does seem to get things done. He's a bit sort of out there. Crash or crash through? Are you buying it?
Wow, I never would have thought of him, but he could whip it all into shape in probably 6 months, I reckon. V'landys is a great idea.
Who are your nominations?
Well, it depends who wins government, doesn't it? Because it's like the Prime Minister's best mate. I mean, if it's Peter Dutton, you got to look at Gina Reinhardt. All right, she's doing a lot of the heavy lifting for him in the background. I'm not sure we'd see her on stage, but I'm sure we'll see her supporting him in the background. And if it's Anthony Albanese, then maybe we'll have to go for South Sydney's other high-profile fan and hard owner, Mike Cannon-Brookes. He was everywhere a few years ago. He's sort of pulled his head in a bit now, busy running Atlassian. But he sort of has the boardroom pull and the appeal to the young masses, which is ironic because he lives in, one of Australia's most expensive houses.
Well, so does Anthony Albanese.
Yeah, true. So, they're my nominations.
Yeah, nice. Well, we'll see where we go. I mean, every day there's some new weird thing coming out of the Trump administration. And Anthony, he still doesn't get into office for another couple of months. So strap in.
All right, James, for our second topic, we're looking at super funds behaving badly, and our old favourite, Cbus, is at the front of the firing line. ASIC came out this week and said there were widespread customer failings on death and disability claims across the sector and took the $94 billion Cbus to court on Tuesday for over $20 million it says is owed to bereaved members. ASIC alleged Cbus had not processed more than 10,000 disability and death benefit claims, leaving more than 6,500 members out of pocket. James, this is a shocker. I mean, this has the fees for dead people kind of look about it. It's not paying legitimate claims or having serious delays on paying those claims. It's that inexcusable sort of thing that can very quickly sap up credibility and social license, as we saw with the Banking Royal Commission 5 years ago. Cbus, though, has a bit of an excuse, though. James, what is it, and does it cut the mustard?
Well, it does have an excuse in a way. The industry funds and lots of super funds have outsourced a lot of this administration stuff, and I guess you might call it the sort of boring stuff of processing payments and claims. They've outsourced this to a bunch of third parties. They're called external administrators. The biggest one in the market is owned by a Japanese company now, MUFG, used to be known as Link Group. And so Link Group's had some resourcing issues, particularly coming out of COVID. It's had delays processing these claims and payments. This is an industry-wide problem. It's not just Cbus, and ASIC has already said there'll be more cases to be brought. So they have an excuse. The industry is struggling with these third-party administrators. But ASIC has no truck with that excuse.
Yeah.
ASIC is quite correctly saying, you're the ones who decided to outsource this, So you have to have control of how that outsource contract works. And I think that's entirely reasonable. So it does raise the question, do we have a systemic issue here? The super fund sector is getting very big, lots of money involved, and they've outsourced a lot of this stuff really to one main provider. So there's one company that is systemic to the sector, and that means that there's the possibility of a systemic issue with poor administration. Now, super's boring enough to a lot of people, Anthony, and the administration of super, I know, will make lots of people's eyes glaze over. But this is such an important sector to Australia, and the confidence in the sector is really important. So we need things like administration to be almost flawless.
Yeah, and that company Link, James, I mean, just to explain it, it's doing a lot of the heavy lifting for the super funds on stuff that's really hard. It's that digitization. It's turning, what's always been like paper record keeping into online systems, efficient members statements, all that sort of stuff, like all the bread and butter behind the scenes work that a super fund would normally do. Now, James, this week, so we had ASIC come out earlier in the week, and then we saw Christian Falk, the Cbus CEO. He fronted a Senate inquiry on Thursday, which is something we're seeing more of around these sorts of scandals. I mean, he said Cbus had been far from perfect. Once again, though, James, how would you rate his performance on a scale of contrite to bullshite?
I'm not sure what to. I've never heard of that scale, Anthony, but I like it. Look, I think he was more at the contrite end of things.
Yep.
Cbus has had a shocker of a year. I mean, all these revelations about CMFEU and its relation to criminal elements. Cbus is the CFMEU super fund, as well as some other unions. So they've been under fire all year. But look, I think he came out and said it's just not good enough. We apologise to people whose claims we've delayed. We can't let this go on. We do have some issues here, but we've got to get it right. So, but Anthony, it does remind you that this one did get very political very quickly, and that's sort of natural. We've had these long super wars. The Liberal Party loves bashing up on industry funds and the industry funds are target number one because of their links to the unions and the Labor Party. So does that raise the bar for these industry funds, do you think? Do they have to be squeaky clean because of the political links?
Absolutely. I mean, and they can either whinge about the politics and perceptions about it all or just pull their socks up and be better. But James, there's one big reason why they should be better, and that's because of how big they are, right? The industry funds together are managing $1.37 trillion on behalf of about half the Australians that have super. They've got such a big responsibility, and normal everyday Australians gave their money over to the industry funds because they've been convinced that the industry funds are better, right? Like the industry funds have done so well running that compare the pair marketing campaign over the past 15 or 20 years. And if you're going to do that and attract all these customers, then the bar's probably going to be higher for you. I mean, that's just reality of life. So
we should say, Anthony, their performance has been outstanding too. That's why they've done so well. A big part of it.
Yeah. So they tell us they're better than the rest, and they base it on their historical returns. But it's not a stretch, James, for a normal person on the street to take that compare the pair to governance and risk management, which are key to returns anyway. And it's also not a stretch to ignore the whole past performance is not an indicator of future performance disclaimer because, of course we all think it is. That's why we make these decisions. That's why they put those numbers out there in front of us. So James, I say stuff the libs, stuff the doubters, do it for your customers, members as industry funds like to call them. Like they need to be squeaky clean because they're so big. They put themselves up on a pedestal. That's what's got them to be so big. That's why they've got so many customers, and they keep telling us how good they are for the country and all the workers. Well, live up to it. Time for them to lift their game. But James, something we've been grappling with for the past couple of months in particular, just because of their size. I mean, systemically, how important are these guys to financial markets and the economy, the political system, the everyday lives? And assuming you're going to say they are systemically very important, do they need more oversight, more regulation, more government guarantees? I don't know, something to help them with these things like back office processing.
Well, I think the first port of call is what you just said. They need to pull their socks up. They are even on as Christian Falk appeared at the Senate. We had a couple of the super lobby groups appearing, basically saying, this has been the greatest innovation in Australian life. in the last 32 years. We've created this incredible retirement system. And that's exactly right. It is a great innovation. What we have, every person who comes to Australia from a big wig from the US or the UK says, "Wow, this is the best thing about Australia." But it's just got to keep getting better.
Yeah.
I think that's the point. And the super sector can't sort of rest on its laurels and say, we've in the last 32 years we've built this great system. That's great, but now it's got to keep maturing and keep getting better. I think the performance they've had, the governance they've had, the regulation they've had has broadly sort of worked. But now we're getting into this different phase. More people will be retiring. More people will be calling on their savings. More people will need help with administration and insurance claims and payments. So the sector needs to get better. I think regulators are all over this. It's not a political thing. It's about regulators making sure that the people whose money it is can actually get that money when they need that money. So I think we will see more regulation. Do we need better governance? Is it fair enough that an industry funds board has 6 representatives from employer groups and 6 representatives of unions rather than 12 representatives from sectors that know all about financial markets and retirement and all that sort of thing? I don't know. I think there's room for improvement. And I think the smart funds will say, yeah, we want to improve more and we want to get better. I think the question, as you say, is does the government need to nudge that? Or, is there a danger we get dragged back into these silly superannuation wars where it's all political? That's what we don't want. Let's just make this sector's really important. Let's just make it better.
Yeah.
Let's keep working away at that.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, James, it is a government-mandated industry. Like, it wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the fact that 11.5% of our wages were mandatorily directed into super every fortnight. But, James, the other thing that got me thinking this week as ASIC went after Cbus, do you reckon our regulators are starting to get a little bit political too and playing the politics?
What do you mean?
Well, so you've got ASIC going after Cbus. Cbus is on its knees, right? It's had a bad year. It's had a bad year. That's the Howard Marks way of saying it, James. But then, you see ACCC go after Qantas with the ghost flights last year when Qantas was absolutely on its knees, and that was the knockout blow. Then we have also the ACCC going after Coles and Woolworths. A couple other the supermarket chains right as they're copping it in the neck and going after them on the down. Like, do you reckon we'll ever see a regulator going after like high-flying companies, someone at the top of the game, someone to really scare the pants off business in Australia rather than these weaker targets?
I hope so. I think you're right. I mean, it's a bit of that law of life, Bad things happen in threes. Yeah. People tend to kick you when you're down. The one thing I'd say about that, Anthony, is yes, they are choosing the sort of most obvious targets, but they're probably the most obvious targets for a reason. Yeah. They're our biggest grocery chains. It's our biggest airline. It's one of our biggest super funds. So you do want your regulators trying to get bang for their buck. But I don't think you're completely off the mark here. There does feel like there's some political points to be scored, and regulators have to play the game of politics too a little bit. So perhaps that does feed into it.
At least they're big targets.
Yeah, well said. Well, Anthony, we'll come back after the break and Santa's sleigh bells are ringing in the distance. We've got a question about what's going to be in your Christmas stocking. Back in a sec. Welcome back. If you want to know more about what we're talking about today and a whole lot more, AFR subscribers can sign up to the Chanticleer newsletter at join.afr.com/Chanticleer. Every Saturday morning, the newsletter pulls together the best Chanticleer columns from the week and the best bits of this podcast and delivers them straight to your inbox. All right, Anthony, I believe we ascend the summit one more time at the AFR on Tuesday. We're both appearing at the CFO, that's Chief Financial Officer Live Summit on Tuesday. It's going to be great.
I love the CFO Live Summit, James. CFOs, they're my people. I really enjoy it.
Fantastic. Also, Monday and Tuesday, we've got the G20 Leaders Summit in Rio de Janeiro. Anthony Albanese is attending. We're going to get much out of this. Couple of photo opportunities.
There sure will be. And President Biden's last hurrah, James. Imagine being in his position. You're turning up, you've only got a couple months left. Everyone probably just wants to ask you about your successor.
And then during the week, we've got a stack of annual general meetings. BlueScope, Seek, Charter Hall, Downer, Worley, Cube, ResMed, Lavisa, Solpats, NextDC. Have you learned anything from AGM season so far, Anthony?
A couple of surprising strikes, James. I read about one this week, Goodman Group, and just looking at its remuneration structure, it was really, really fascinating. But for the most part, companies are flying through their AGMs all right, but a couple have got tripped up, and Goodman Group's one to watch, and also CSL, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, no, there's been the size of some of the strikes has been striking, dare I say, 80%, even up towards 90% against the REM reports. So, yeah, watch this space.
88.4% at Chris Curtis's favourite company, Perpetual, James.
Wow, that just makes it better value, Anthony. I'm sure. That's general advice only. We love questions here at the Chanticleer podcast, Anthony, and this week our question is from Rachel from Sydney. If you've got a question you want to send in, you can email us at chanticleer@afr.com, or you can also send us a question in audio form. Just record a voice memo on your phone, include your name and where you're from, and email it to us. And that is exactly what Rachel's done.
Hi there, Anthony and James. This is Rachel from Sydney. It has been a big and interesting year in business and markets, and I think there's a few people out there who are ready for a break. With that in mind, and summer just around the corner, what books are on your reading list this year? And are there any standout reads that have influenced your perspective on business or leadership? Thanks so much for the podcast. It's my favourite thing to listen to at the gym.
Oh, thanks, Rachel. That's very kind. Anthony, do you want to go first? I mean, I guess there's an obvious business book that we'll be recommending this year.
There sure is. The Chairman's Lounge by Joe Aston. I mean, yes, he's a mate. But for all the people over the years that have asked me what Joe Aston's like, read The Chairman's Lounge. I mean, the personality does come out in it. It's not as short as a Rear Window column, but there's a lot more to it. And Joe's strength, I mean, apart from his writing, it's just to point out the really obvious things that the rest of us skirt over. The things that we, companies say and we're just like, righto. But he actually goes, hang on, is that true? Like when former Qantas boss Alan Joyce says the airline's on the verge of going bust just before it raises capital. And Joe's like, hang on, is that true? And he just picks apart that. But James, if you want a recommendation that's a little bit more arm's length than that.
Yes.
So the Bible in investing and value investing in particular. I mean, this might be a hot topic down at Sohn. It's The Intelligent Investor by Ben Graham, right? So it was first published in 1949. It's one or two. Yeah, it's one of those books that sort of set up the whole institutional funds management community, how they think about value investing. Warren Buffett says it's by far the best book ever written. It's sort of like the Bible on Wall Street and for all the value investing guys. Anyway, so that was published in 1949. Obviously, business and investing, the market has changed a lot since then. That's 75 years ago. Business is no longer just industrial manufacturing, factories, stuff like that. So to bridge the gap between now and then, there's a Wall Street Journal columnist, Jason Zweig, they've reprinted the book, and then he's done a chapter by chapter, he's done a bit of an explanation about putting a bit of modern day context around it and trying to translate it a little bit, put them in a current day context. So that's on my reading list for this year. James, The Intelligent Investor by Ben Graham, edition 3. What about you?
Well, a few weeks ago I went to lunch with Andrew Lockhart, who's the CEO of Metrics, a big private capital business, and we had lunch at Rockpool, which they're now in control of. Well, he gave me a book recommendation, one from the archives. It's by a former Financial Review journalist, actually, called Trevor Sykes, and it's called The Bold Riders. Mm-hmm. Now, get this, Anthony. Imagine, you know how much I love a good corporate collapse. The Bold Riders is the definitive story of Australian corporate collapses. 652 pages of every corporate collapse in Australia going back to the 1800s.
Wow.
I mean, I rushed to eBay, got myself a copy. I've only just started it, but it is fantastic. Trevor's got a great turn of phrase. And your recommendation, The Intelligent Investor, is about all the ways you can make money. This is about all the ways you can lose it. So, look, I mean, that's one from the archives. There's the other thing I'd recommend. The FT does a great list of. It's not quite out yet, but it'll be out in the next few weeks. A short list and a long list of the best business books of the year. That's always required spot to go and see what you've caught up on and missed out on. But yes, obviously the Chairman's Lounge is on my bedside table too, Anthony. I'm really enjoying it so far. The other thing I'd say about Joe is he's really funny. Like, it's one thing to have there's plenty of dry business books out there. The Chairman's Lounge is not one of them, so it's great. All right, Anthony, I've got to get back to the Sohn conference, mate. It's there's some more stock tips to dissect, and I'm looking forward to seeing you up in Sydney next week for the CFO Live Summit.
Yeah, great. I'll see you then, and I'm looking forward to read about the rest of these stock tips from Sohn, James.
Fantastic. We'll see you next week. If you like the podcast and you want to hear more, consider sharing or giving the podcast a review, as it helps other listeners find us. And don't forget to follow wherever you get your podcasts. At The Financial Review, we investigate the big stories about markets, business and power. For more, go to afr.com and you can subscribe to The Financial Review, the daily habit of successful people, at afr.com/subscribe. Chanticleer was hosted by me, James Thompson and Anthony McDonald, and it was produced by Alex Gow and Lap Fan. Our theme is by Alex Gow. The executive producer is Fiona Buffini.
The Australian Financial Review.